Welcome back to Global with me, Tim Wilcox. An Emirates Airbus A380 jet has made what's believed to be the current longest non-stop scheduled commercial flight by distance. The plane covered about 14,200 kilometres when it touched down in Auckland in New Zealand on Wednesday. The flight took just under 16.5 hours. It was supposed to be the world's longest non-stop commercial flight by duration as well, but it landed almost an hour early. It means that a Qantas flight from Dallas to Sydney, which covers 13,800 kilometres, is currently the longest flight by duration. Are you keeping up with me? It takes just under 17 hours. And if you think that is a very long, gruelling flight, spare a thought for those on board a record-breaking flight from 1947 from Sydney to London, which took 8 stops and 4 days. After taking off from Sydney, the Lockheed Constellation aircraft first stopped in Darwin to refuel before going on to Singapore, where it stayed overnight. How civilised, since there was no night flying. Other refuelling stops followed in Calcutta, Karachi, and then the plane stayed for another night in Cairo. Tripoli was the final stop before arrival in London. We can speak now to aviation historian Keith McCloskey. He's in our studio in Edinburgh. It all sounded very glamorous back in those days, you know, fine dining and all the sort of, all the trappings of sort of luxury, really. But they were long old journeys, weren't they?
Hello, Tim. Yes, they were long journeys. Wherever you went, my family, we lived in Africa, in Nigeria, and we were posted around various parts of the Commonwealth at the time. I think the longest journey we ever did was to Bombay, or Mumbai as it is now. But there was a glamour to it. But having said that, we were young children at the time, and I was only, my earliest memories, I was 6 years old. But there was a glamour to it. But my mother would dress us up in our finest clothes. She would put on a nice outfit, and she had a nice fur coat. My dad always wore his suit, and off we'd trot to the airport. It was London Airport in those days, it wasn't Heathrow. And we would fly out, and flights to say Nigeria. We were living in Kano, as my earliest memories, and the flight would always stop at a European destination first.
Okay, so let's just look at what's happening now. So this flight, 14,200 kilometres, 17 hours and 15 minutes. You know, that is fantastic, isn't it, in terms of getting around the world? And actually, it could get even shorter, couldn't it? What do you think about that? I mean, you've been talking nostalgically about those long trips, but presumably you're in favour of this, aren't you?
Oh, absolutely. It seems to me, though, that what's happened to air travel in that time is that basically it's getting the passengers on board and taking them directly there and amusing them in between. In those days, you had to stop because the aircraft had to refuel, and in many places you didn't have the luxury of a night stop. The last stop for us before we crossed the Sahara would be Tripoli, was the main stop, sometimes Barcelona before we'd cross that way over the Sahara down to Nigeria. But it broke the journey up, but it was over a full day's flying and getting off the air. You had to get off the aircraft because it had to be refueled.
Yeah, just looking. Sorry, we haven't got a lot of time left, but looking towards the future, though. I mean, what do you think of this idea of like a scramjet technology, which people are talking about? You know, London to New York in 11 minutes.
Yeah, that's what it needs. It needs a speeding up because the aircraft can make the journey now, and anything that can be done to. I don't think the problem so much is the length of the journey; it's the time. If you can speed it up, I think it'll be much more comfortable for people, because I think people cooped up in a tube for such a long period of time, you get bored, and there's the danger of deep vein thrombosis and all this sort of thing. But it's boredom mainly. Yeah. The stops help to break it up.
Exactly.
It wasn't very pleasant, but anything that speeds it up can only be good.
Okay, 11 minutes to New York. That is pretty fast there. Keith McCloskey, thank you very much. That's Mach 10 and very high temperatures as well.